Hey guys, Jeff Landfield here. We are about to go into the Atwood building for a very high-level interview. All right, Governor Walker, I really want to thank you for joining me here and agreeing to have me interview you. It's really great. I think this is going to take 4 to 5 hours. So if you have the time. Before we started, you had said that you were in this building before you were governor.
I was.
Years ago.
I was. We had a lease here. Our law firm was here in this building. That's one floor above where my office is right now, on the 18th floor. And so when I get in the elevator now, by habit, I sometimes push the 18th floor button just because that's where I used to be for many years. So
you're back. You're back.
I'm back.
So you're coming to the end of your first term. What would you say has been the high point or your biggest accomplishment so far?
Well, certainly, obviously the Medicaid expansion. Anytime you can bring, health care to, I think it's now 50,000 Alaskans. You can bring in $1 billion of revenue from the federal government to Alaska at a time we really need it, and reduce our budget by about $16 million. That is the proverbial win-win. So I'm very, very pleased about that. The fiscal situation, one of the reasons I ran is because of the fiscal situation. We were in a $1.6 billion deficit. Nobody was talking about it. We just quietly drawing from savings accounts. And so, we now have, for the first time, fiscal certainty in Alaska. We've always heard that from different industries. And we as a government need fiscal certainty. As a state, we need fiscal certainty. We now have that. We've closed 80% of the fiscal gap, which grew to $3.7 billion. So we've closed 80% of that. Now it's 0.7 is what's left. And that may close itself out based upon the price of oil rising. So that's a significant piece as well. I didn't know it was going to take that long. I know it was going to take 3.5 years to close that, but we did. So we did close that. And the third thing, I think, is our cabinet. Our cabinet is very unique, with who's in the cabinet, the diversity of our cabinet. That's what you get with the unity ticket, I think, is you get folks that wouldn't normally be aligned necessarily. And so we've got some very broad spectrum of a cabinet as well.
To follow up on the fiscal plan, that's been a big part of this administration. And there's been some, pushback from the legislature on some of the proposals you had. Do you feel like you've accomplished what you set out to with the fiscal plan, or is there still more to do? They passed the SB 26 this session, which is a permanent fund draw.
Well, I think one thing about Juneau is that you get what you can get, and it's not what everybody wants necessarily. I certainly proposed initially something much different than we ended up with. The first thing, of course, the part of the fiscal plan was to reduce government. Close 40 facilities. We did reduce, employment by about 3,000. Closed about 100 different programs or modified programs that were there. So we brought it down by $1.7 billion of reduced spending. So that was a significant part. Is it exactly what we wanted? No, it's not. But you have to settle for something not exactly what you want in order to get to move the ball down the field.
So on the spending, some Alaskans say spending is too much. It has been reduced quite a bit from the top levels 5 or 6 years ago. Do you feel the budget's where it needs to be now, or is there further?
I think it's pretty close. I think that this year the legislature modified my budget. They went up, I think, less than 1%. A very small percentile is what they increased my budget by. So I think we're in that. The downward pressure always needs to be on the budget. There's no question about that. You always need to look for, government efficiencies, and we certainly have done that with different departments. So, but I think it's pretty close. Someone coming in and saying, "Well, we're going to cut $1 billion." I always say, "So where exactly would that be coming from at this point?" We inherited a bit of a mess on the budget, and we significantly reduced it. Not fun, not enjoyable at all, painful to eliminate programs that have been with us for a long time, but somebody had to do it.
Well, you can see too when the legislature, certain hearings, they want to reduce $20 or $30 million, and a lot of people call up, and then the money gets put. So I agree. I think cutting $500 million or another $1 billion might be a very challenging.
It would be, and we have to, at that point, what kind of a education system do we want? What kind of a public safety system do we want? So, every reduction has impact somebody. There's no question about that, and that's unavoidable. But so the basic services is what I believe we're down to at this point.
So your victory with Byron Malott in 2014, the first couple of years it was you were the governor, and the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate, and then in 2016 it shifted. Democrats took control of the House, but it's been maybe not great, some of the interactions with the legislature. Did you anticipate that when you were elected, and how do you feel that's kind of been going overall with you in the legislature?
Well, there's no question after the midterm election, 2016, it was a significant change, and with Bryce Edgman as a speaker, what he did was, as an example, one of the most challenging votes taken, perhaps in recent, if not long, history of Alaska was on Senate Bill 26, as far as the restructuring of the permanent fund, using part of those earnings for governmental services. That was a very difficult issue for many legislators. But you look at the vote in the House; it was almost evenly split between the House majority and the House minority.
Yeah, it was a very odd,
unprecedented, and that happened largely because it had a lot to do with Speaker Edgman allowing it to come into the floor for a vote. Typically, some things don't come to the floor for a vote unless you have, the vote within the caucus, etc. This was not a evenly across the caucus vote. So we worked aggressively with the House majority and minority to make that happen, and we could do that because again we're somewhat apolitical as far as our association.
So SB 26 also passed the Senate, but it's been probably more contentious with the Senate. How's that been, dealing with the Senate majority, and Senate President Kelly has been pretty adamant about we're not doing taxes or revenue. He's been very adamant about that.
That was pretty challenging as far as what they were not going to do, but they did pass 26 first. Or when we introduced the Permanent Fund Protection Act, they passed that initially, and so they've been there on that restructuring, not so much on the other pieces of the additional revenue, but I think we're about there.
Speaking of the permanent fund, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of people know it's been defined by the veto of the dividend in 2015. What would you say to the Alaskans who still maybe don't understand why you did that, or maybe are still upset about it?
Well, the money that was vetoed, of course, was left in the fund. None of it was spent, so the money is still there to grow the fund. It became obvious that we're going to have to draw out of the earnings of the permanent fund for two things now. It used to draw out only for one thing. That was for the dividend. Now we have to draw out for government as well as the dividend. So we need to grow the fund so when we draw it out, we don't overdraw to the point that dividends start going away, the fund starts to get smaller. So we had to have what's called a structured draw. We knew that. The legislature, some legislators specifically said to me, we're not going to do anything until you do something. You don't think you have guts enough to do this, and it was a terrible political decision to make, but it was absolutely critical to make that decision. I'm the governor of Alaska. I don't get to do a political polling about what's popular. I mean, I guess one could, some do. I don't. I do what's the right thing to do for the future of Alaska. How do we guarantee dividends out in the future that they'll grow? Now this year it's at $1,600. It went from 1,000 to 1,600. The average dividend over the history of the program is 1,100. So now we're way above that because we're growing the process. So, it was a tough thing to do, but clearly the most difficult decision I've ever made, no question about that. Not one that I took lightly at all. But if I didn't take that first step and show that leadership, I'll guarantee you we would not have closed the fiscal gap that we have closed now.
There's been some talk by people, Senator Wielechowski and others, about putting the permanent fund, the current formula, or some formula in the Constitution. How do you feel that should happen?
I've said I wouldn't be opposed. Only thing I don't want to necessarily have a cap in there. In other words, I want to make sure that for it to grow as much as it can grow. So if there was something in there on a floor, I think that would be fine. But I hate to limit, how much it could grow.
Okay. Talk a little bit about crimes on many Alaskans' minds. Your First Lady Donna Walker has done some work on the opioid epidemic, and then you signed recently a bill that would allow judges to have more lenience or leeway with bail, and then take into account out-of-state criminal history for people that get arrested. Do you feel more changes need to happen in the criminal justice system? And what do you attribute the rise in crime to?
Well, it started in 2010, the rise in crime, and it was Alaska was hit by the wave of opioid abuse, overuse, and addiction. So, when we hit Alaska in 2010, and we started to see the crime rise starting go, and it rose significantly. You know, I was one of the first governors that issued a declaration of disaster on the opioid crisis, and we treated it like one. We treated it like a forest fire. We treated it like an earthquake. We treated it like an oil spill because it was of that magnitude. And so we put together an incident command system. You know, Dr. Jay Butler heads that up. We were having weekly meetings, full cabinet meetings on one issue on the opioid crisis. So the legislation we introduced, we didn't get all of it this year. We got 3 pieces of the legislation that we wanted on crime. There's more that can be done. The legislature, I believe, has appropriately acknowledged the crisis, and so it's a matter of you don't flip one switch and suddenly it's gone. We've brought in a lot more drug dogs. We're intercepting on drugs coming to Alaska. It's a multifaceted issue, but there's no question the rise in crime is absolutely tied to the drug issue.
So SB 91 kind of changed the theory of crime. Instead of incarcerating people, everybody, and spending all the money that we didn't have, it was kind of designed more to try to rehabilitate people. But right now, it seems like to get into drug rehab or to get help, it takes quite a long time. Is that something that state's working on the legislature?
Well, some of that's going on while they're incarcerated, but clearly 91 was very broad, and I think that some things had to be put back in the judges' toolboxes, and you mentioned them as far as the bills that were passed this year, having to do with background as far as criminal history from other states can now come into play on whether or not they're going to be on their own recognizance or they're going to be on the bail issues. For the Attorney General to be able to, through a regulatory process, determine a particular drug is illegal is much quicker than having to wait for a legislative session to go through and determine that that's an legal drug. So, we have some tools that have been put back in that allows us to do our job and the judicial branch to do their job much more efficiently.
All right. So obviously, you care a lot about the gas line. A long time you've been working on the gas line. Last year, there was an agreement signed in China with President Trump, President Xi. You were there, Sinopec, a bunch of companies. Many people say this is the closest we've been to getting a gas line. Others are apprehensive about the Chinese involvement. But where is the gas line right now, and what's the likelihood we're going to see this project happen?
Well, I think what we've seen is what happens when Alaska acts as a sovereign. I've long felt that we were not in the proper role as the owner of the gas before it comes out of the ground. We're like the rancher in South Dakota or in Texas as far as the ownership of the resource. So I've always felt we were in the wrong seat or in no seat. We just sort of sat back and hoped if we incentivize this and incentivize that, something might happen. And so we've taken a different role in that. So when I signed that document in front of President Trump and President Xi in Beijing on November 9th in the Great Hall, that was a step in the right direction as far as us asserting ourselves as a sovereign. When the producers, asked me in February of 16, would I be willing to take on this project rather than slow it down further, I said, of the 2 options, I'll absolutely take it on, and I'm glad I said yes to that. So the structure in place that the legislature created, the AGDC organization, that was very fortuitous. We had that. Dan Fauske did a great job of initially organizing that group and setting it up. If that hadn't been in place, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of the opportunity we have today. Do I feel that gas line is going to happen? I absolutely do. I look at the trade imbalance. We're probably the largest energy project on the trade imbalance in the United States for China. My communication with Secretary Ross on a regular basis on this project, Secretary Mnuchin, the White House, they want this project to happen. In China, they want this project to happen. China wants the gas. It's not about our longest customer has been Japan.
What would the exporting gas? What are the estimates as far as lowering the trade imbalance every year?
Well, it's $8 to $10 billion a year is what the estimate is now. We believe there's probably 200 years supply of gas. So if it went on for 100 years, that's $1 trillion. So it's a pretty significant number of what it would do. So because of that, there's an urgency from Washington for this project, urgency from China on this project. So we've never had that kind of push from above, I'll put it that way.
So obviously you were over there, and then last year President Xi came to Alaska for a trip, and China's Alaska's largest trading partner. What's this kind of ongoing trade war? What impact could that have on them being our trading partner, and also potentially on the gas line?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. There's no question about that. But it also accentuates part of the reason for the trade war is because of intellectual properties, not just goods. And so recently there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about 10 days ago that talked about bifurcating the issue and just dealing with the intellectual property separate from the goods themselves. Our product is one of the goods, obviously. So I think it's going to resolve itself. And you know, if we were in the process of ordering pipe today, I'd be probably much more concerned about that. We're not in that at that stage now. We're still working out the final negotiation, the regulatory process. So, you know, I don't think that, you know, could it have some impact? Of course, anything could have some impact. Do I believe it's going to in any way stop the project? Absolutely not. In fact, quite honestly, I think it's accelerating the project.
You've branded yourself obviously as an independent. You were originally going to run in the Democratic primary, and then you switched back to petition after Mark Begich got in the race. Now that there's a Democrat and a Republican and you, as an independent, do you feel that helps you or hurts you?
You know, we should actually switch anything. We looked at whether we were going to run in that, and we thought we would do that. We didn't do anything to sort of move into the Democratic primary. We looked at the option that it created and evaluate that. We thought we were going to do that. You know, I'm very happy being who I am. You know, I'm an independent, and I'm very comfortable being in that role. I think that, you know, we have a lot of support from Republicans, a lot of support from Democrats. So, you know, we're not all in on any particular ticket or any particular party. We're in the middle as nonpartisan, and so I'm very comfortable with that.
Are you concerned at all because in the past you had the support from Democrats and progressives? Are you concerned that might go over to Begich, or is it just?
Oh, it could. I'm sure that some that's certainly a case, and I'm sure some of our Republican support may have gone to some of the Republicans. I mean, that's just the nature of the game in a three-way, and so we're sort of in the middle with no party affiliation, and we're comfortable there.
All right. So it's been almost 4 years. What's been the kind of greatest experience, or I mean, I know you met President Trump, President Obama, President Xi, but what's been for you the greatest experience that you've had so far?
You know, from a personal basis, one of them was certainly driving John Baker's second sled in the start of the Iditarod here in Anchorage with my grandson in the basket. That was something that I'll never forget that. So I enjoyed those kinds of opportunities immensely. I have to say another one was in Point Hope recently. I was there for an Nuknatuck. They got 5 whales this year, so I was up there for the celebration, and they invited me on to for the blanket toss. And
I saw that.
I'd never done that before, and I've sort of one of those things you see people doing. You kind of think, I kind of like to do that, but you have to be invited, obviously, and so they invited me to do that, and that was a real highlight.
I'd be worried I might break through. You know?
Well, you know what's nice. You think it's like a trampoline. It's the opposite of a trampoline. I mean, you don't try to jump at all. The skin itself, as they pull it back, that actually flips you up in the air or whatnot. And so it's, you know, it was created to get higher to be able to look for whales and whatnot. So I was just looking for making sure that was below me when I came back down. And I'd say my third thing is I drove a tractor on Drive Your Tractor to Work Day. I led a group of 15 farm tractors in Palmer over to the agricultural office, whatnot, and that was a great way to start the day. About 7 o'clock and a beautiful morning in the valley to drive a farm tractor. I enjoy running equipment. That's what I used to do, so that was fun.
So that's a question I had. Since being governor, do you still drive? Are you allowed to drive, or how is your day-to-day?
No, I am, but all governors have always had some assistance and whatnot, because, you know, while I'm traveling between here and another location, I'm typically on the phone or communicating with somebody, so it's hard to do both.
Like, could you get in the car right now and go grab lunch, or go grab some ice cream? Could you?
I could do whatever. I could. I mean, they're very, you know, and I do occasionally. I have to jump in my pickup and run down to Spenard Builders and buy some lumber, just to get back to my roots a little bit and cut a few boards. So I'm giving that leeway.
I guess the last thing is, you know, Alaskans are going to face a big choice in November. You know, why should they vote for, you know, the Walker-Malott ticket?
Well, I think you have to look at in some respects, you look at our makeup of our cabinet, look at the makeup of what we're doing. We're able to do things that, as a unity ticket, different. You look at what from the Obama administration, what we did on health care, what we received in Alaska unique. Only Alaska received some of these benefits on health care by working with that administration. Working immediately with the Trump administration on resource development. You know, we have the ability to. We don't have to sit back and see who matches up with our party affiliation. on the federal side. We're there as independents and can walk into any office at any time. I'm not saying others can't, but we're received, I think, a bit differently because we are apolitical.
All right, well, Governor, I appreciate you sitting down with me. I'm really happy you agreed to do this. And
you bet. Always a pleasure, Joe.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.